Dear guests, the next panel discussion is Building an Open Urban Data Future, the Case of Cyprus. Please take your seat while our speakers prepare for the panel.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to participate in the Cyprus Forum. The session today, which is titled Building an Open Urban Data Future, the Case of Cyprus, aims to discuss evidence, data, how this is shared, standardized, governed, so that agencies, researchers, and communities can act together to shape better cities. So the panel builds on the work of a Horizon research project, which is called Twin to Expand. It's a project which is coordinated by the Society and Urban Forum Lab at the University of Cyprus in collaboration with University College London, Chalmers University of Technology, Turin Polytechnic, and Space Index Limited in the UK. The project has as an aim to strengthen excellence in evidence-based design and planning through spatial urban analysis models that hopefully help us to address very important questions for cities, such as, for example, where to locate activities, how to distribute services equitably, and how to support well-being and biodiversity, among others. So through the project, we developed and we used existing models and developed new ones in collaboration to work in both data-rich environments, but also in data-scarce contexts like Cyprus, built from open source data and validated through local stakeholder engagement. So we try to ensure that they are not only technically rigorous, but also practically relevant and relevant to the context. So the panel today aims to set a practical, let's say, agenda to discuss ways, challenges, possibilities to open, standardize, and govern data, urban data, so that Cyprus can, on one hand, align with European strategies, benefit from international best practices, but also maybe even serve as a testbed for innovation. So to discuss this, we have with us experts in the field. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be here. So I'll do a very brief introduction. So we have with us Professor Marios Polycarpou, a professor at the University of Cyprus and director of KIOS Research and Innovation Center, leading Cyprus' efforts in intelligent systems for smart infrastructure and critical networks. We also have Professor Marina Neophytou, the Dean of the School of Engineering at the University of Cyprus, with extensive expertise in environmental engineering, climate resilience, sustainable urban development. Gareth Simons, who is with us from the UK, a senior researcher fellow at UCL's Energy Institute, working on data-rich models of the building stock and city to inform real-world policy and design. Happy to have with us Valentina Martin, an associate director at Space Index Limited in London, an expert in applying spatial analytics to real-world planning and design challenges worldwide. We also have with us Pavlos Loizou, the founder and CEO of AskWire, advancing data-driven real estate and financial analytics in Cyprus, bridging private sector innovation with urban data futures. So the session will be moderated by me, Nadia Charalambous. I am at the University of Cyprus as well, at the Department of Architecture, leading the Society and Urban Forum Lab, and Ilaria Geddes, who is a senior researcher at the CERF Lab and working with us at the university. I know the time is limited, so we'll do our best to meet the organizers' guidelines, let's say. So what we thought we'd do is to address two key questions for us in relation to the topic today. So I'll start with one, and I will ask you to reply, to address this issue around 4 or 5 minutes each. And then Ilaria will move on to the second question, and hopefully we will have some time for audience contribution. So urban data governance often gets stuck between EU directives and sometimes fragmented local realities. So in Cyprus, we would like to discuss what is the most urgent step to bridge this gap. Is technical, institutional, cultural, but also to discuss what are we really trying to achieve with open data or more comprehensive data better decisions, accountability, transparency in this area. And we would really like if you could point to best practices from your own experience and from your own field that shows how data can move from availability to actual usage in decision making. So I will start this way. So I will start with Professor Polycarpou.
First, I guess.
He's on.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Nadia for congratulations for the project and also for the organization of the panel. And thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. So I think we all know about everything that is going on in the AI area. So AI is kind of taking over economically and you know, even research-wise, a lot of things are moving in that direction in education, in healthcare, in many different applications. Now, related to AI is the issue of data, and you know, just like we have the EU AI Act, we also have a Data Act, which requires certain things. So data is very important component of in order to analyze how things are going. You need the data. In Cyprus, for a long time, data was not readily available. However, in the last 20 years, we developed a lot of methodologies, a lot of new sensing devices, a lot of things that, you know, we can get the data. I think what we're lacking is, as a country, is a way to collect the data. So there are a lot of agencies that would like, ideally, to put data. I mean, some of it is open, some of it is not. So I'm not too concerned about open and close. I think it's just a matter of, we don't have the infrastructure to actually collect the data together, relate data from different fields, and I think this is a key issue. I think it's one of the things that we are doing at the KIOS Center of Excellence. And we are trying to address this gap to some extent. We are developing what we call a Cyprus digital twin, which is really, we have incorporated water resources, energy resources, transportation, GIS, weather data. So we have 80 different data sets incorporated into this digital you know, it's a digital twin of the whole country in order to be able to have this capability to relate, and also as in cases of emergency to be able to say, you know, what if we do this? What's going to happen? You know, so you can run different scenarios in order to do that. But this is one component, and we're dealing with critical infrastructures. I think there's a lot of other components that need to be addressed, and I think we need initiatives that start to do that.
Thank you, Marin.
Thank you, Nadia, as well, for this invitation and this opportunity, actually, to discuss this topic that has a number of dimensions. Mario's raised, in particular, the dimension of and connection with AI. I would like, if I may, to raise the dimension of environmental and climate change necessity for data openness. And in particular, with climate change, I would like really to raise or emphasize the importance, especially for Cyprus, to have this data, because so far there was the somehow the impression that climate change as a planetary or global problem in that dimension, Cyprus has a very little contribution. It has a contribution of the order of a statistical error in terms of greenhouse emissions and so forth. And very often you come across with the question, why should Cyprus bother to go into these transformative processes if its impact in the global change would be so little? But actually, our answer is that climate is not only global, it's also local. And that's why there is a pressing need to act also locally, because this is what, as citizens, we are going to experience. And in fact, it's very, very important to have representative data and holistic picture of the actual climate change problem. And this brings again the interconnectiveness of various sources of data that also Marius raised. But what the dimension in the interconnectiveness I want to raise here, since we are talking in particular for Cyprus, is not only between different disciplines, but also between different geographical regions. And may I raise the divided side of Cyprus and the lack of information from the north, and giving all our data only from the half side of the island, giving a not representative picture for the entire island. And this is a very entire country. So this is a very, very important issue that really changes our holistic picture of what is going on in the country, in Cyprus. And beyond AI, we have to really use authentic intelligence about addressing the meaningful questions first, and then use, in order to get the actual picture from the whole island. And there are very, very heterogeneous situations in the north and south that really affect our decision making for making an impact and causing an effective change, and making the real suggestions, the best suggestions, the optimal suggestions for real problems. So this is a couple of points that I wanted to raise at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia. I think I'm going to recover some of the key ideas of the previous panels. But maybe just before starting the answer of this question, just maybe to explain a bit Space Syntax, so you understand the nature also of my answers. Space Syntax is a company that has a lot of experience, years of experience, around 40 years of experience in industry, but also has a strong relationship with research and the academic world. Let's say we grew out from UCL in London, and it's basically what we do is to transfer the research insights and all the methodologies and the learning through the academic work into digital tools that then we apply in the real world, and we work with private sectors and with public sectors and trying to inform decision making. So I think more generally, I want to cover key ideas to create this, like a strong urban data governance, no? And I think there are three key things to have into account, and I think that they have been kind of mentioned before. So first is you need to focus on questions, not only on data sets. So we need to accept that we can't do everything at once, and that we need to prioritize. And I think the best way to prioritize is to agree on a long-term vision that connects the national objectives with the local realities. And when you have this, then it's easier to identify the outcomes that are urgent to address. So is it about climate change? Is it about public health? Is it about setting a net zero target strategies? So when you have a data structure and governance that it's goal-oriented, so it's outcome-oriented, then it's easier to communicate across different levels, so local communities, national structures, and also the EU. But it's also easier to prioritize data sets, so understand which data set you need to answer these specific questions, and what is the structure that you need in order to organize this data, because data sets are not just you just don't only overlap them. You need to link them in a way that you can explain more. No, and if we don't do this, we have the risk of just collecting available data and not creating meaningful impact. The second thing is coordination. So we need to create channels of coordination, a framework that links technical, institutional, and cultural dimensions. So we don't have just fragmented approaches. And what we need. And countries need a very strong national framework and a task force that set common standards, that coordinate agencies and responsibilities, and also foster evidence-based culture. We have seen that in our experience that when countries don't have this unified vision of their data, then universities, for example, start creating their own data. Then companies want to be the pioneers creating standards for the whole industry. And also then you have local authorities creating their own standards based on short-term needs. And when you have different standards, then you don't have a standard. So this is useless, and you can create this collaboration. And then to overcome this distance is much more difficult than created a collaboration at the very beginning. And the last thing, it's linked with what Marina was saying about thinking about across a scale. So we know that local patterns shape national outcomes, and we know that in the other way around, national visions also shape local realities. And we also know that the key important topics in urban planning unfold across the scales. So climate change, health, economic growth. And so what we need is a data governance that let us zoom into the neighborhood or local levels, but also zoom out in a regional priorities, all in a continuous framework. So linking, for example, health or climate change data infrastructure from local level and creating the links then to analyze this and understand this from the national perspective. And the question is how we do this. And I think from our experience it's working with what you already know. So at Space Syntax, for example, we have learned that street networks are the key bones of urban systems. And when we understand our systems and how they are connected to each other, how they are embedded in different scales, we understand different complex outcomes. We understand health, we understand economic transaction, etc. So, for example, what we have done is to create an integrated urban model that work with the street network as a base from this. And the good thing of this is that the street networks are open source data set that you can download in any type of country, in any type of data set structures. And we work with that, and we link data to this network. And we can zoom in and understand, for example, walkability index, so understand how people are moving at the street level and how close they are to key services, but also we can zoom out and create digital tools, for example, to understand mobility in national levels and understand carbon emissions from mobility, and then we can inform, for example, growth patterns that are sustainable. So it's about, I think, important to link different scales and collaborate.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you to the previous answers. I'm going to build on that, maybe slightly rephrase some of what's already been said. So apologies for any redundancy, but hopefully it is a new or fresh perspective. Nadia, you asked whether it's an issue perhaps technical in nature or cultural in nature or institutional, and I think in reality that to get this working, to get data to be useful and productive and insightful, we need to connect all three of these threads. And like Valentina was saying, we need to ask the right questions, but we also need the right kind of institutional support in terms of developing, because a lot of these workflows are very innovative and thinking outside of the box, and you often need this very institutional based research to support the development of these methods. But then, of course, to make any of this happen, we need the data in the first place. And the tricky thing is getting all three of these to talk to each other. So I'll give you one example from the UK context, which I think has worked fairly well. And that is at the Building Stock Lab at the Energy Institute in UCL. They've recently completed what's called a building stock model. And I think this is an example of what happens when you can get all three of these threads interlinked. So firstly, they have available data sets to draw on. So these data sets are technically available. They're data sets like LiDAR data, so they know the surface of the landscape, building polygons, energy performance certificates. And they have these data sets that they can then interlink to start answering questions. There's a lot of support and inquisitiveness from the government dimension as well, because they're the ones who are asking, how do we use or interleave this data in order to generate insights to help us reach net zero or to target certain land uses for targeted reductions. And so you have people posing the right kinds of questions, but then you also have the institutional players and in this case the Building Stock Lab, who develop methods to interleave this data in quite an innovative way in order to answer these questions. So you need these three threads talking to each other, and the trick is getting there. One observation I will make is that I've noticed that a lot of people talk in very abstract terms, so talk in abstract terms about policy or in technical terms about data. What's often difficult to do is to make that leap from there to tangible on-the-ground solutions. So you need something to inspire people and to show what can be done. And so from that point of view, what I would propose or promote as an approach is to try and think of demonstrator projects. So think of what data do we have, think of what questions do we have. So let's say in the context of Cyprus, that may be trying to identify areas with high heat vulnerability, but then trying to think of a way to develop a demonstrator which interlinks all three of these threads, show what happens if you can get all three of these threads talking together. And then from there, once you get people motivated, it's easier to get the technical to fall into place. It's easier to get the institutional aspect to fall into place. I'm going to pass on from there, but lots more to be said. But thank you very much for your time.
Everything is driven by money. So the long version or the short version of where we are with AI and adoption and everything is that we care, nobody else does. And I say that in the context of it reminds me of 20 years ago or 25 years ago during the dot-com boom where you had a domain name and you were a multi-millionaire. We are there regarding AI, data, etc. And I say this in the context of the need to start by solving more basic problems. For example, and use cases, so I'll come to that. For example, in Cyprus, we do not have a registry of addresses. There is no address registry with numbers. So Andrea Raouzou 19, if you go on Foodie, on World, on the land registry, the pig ends up in the wrong place. It's as simple as that. So we need to dream big, yes, but we need to start small so that there is effectiveness and adoption to start at the grassroots. The second thing is that we need to be cautious that the analysis paralysis that is generated is actually used from the other side. Because from the moment that the government makes decisions without relying on data and having no accountability on when they screw up, and on the other side, when you have companies that have such dominant position, which means that they can raise prices or flood markets or restrict markets like we have in the banking sector, in the petrochemical sector, etc., then what we are seeing between Cyprus, Greece, and Romania is that there is minimal adoption. So we need to be cautious, and also in the same vein, we need to be cautious also what to expect for the government, because there is the difference between digitization and digitalization. If you go on a Cyprus government website, usually they've taken an A4, which has been photocopied on multiple occasions, scanned it into PDF and uploaded it, and this is technical transformation. I put this in the wider context of what we have seen as a company that collects data in these three jurisdictions, is that the demand from the other side is usually when it comes to prices, right? Whether it's demand supply, whether it's going to be new construction, whether it's money flowing. And indeed what we have seen is that even within our small island, the people who care about prices are foreigners, foreign developers, foreign buyers, because the locals believe that they know. And in turn, as a final point, we also need to be cautious that people do not know how to use the data. So it's about having the data being of good quality, the data to be made available, but then also having the people on the other side who can actually use it and interpret it and have to incorporate it in the decision-making process. So in conclusion, if you like, in summary, yes, we need to dream big in terms of having all this data around, but we need to start with baby steps in solving really basic problems to start off with. This is the first. The second is when it comes to small jurisdictions dominated by few companies, the possibility of you being able to sell or them wanting your data is minimal because they already dominate the market, so you are asking them to change how they do business and they have no reason to want to, which is why the economic crisis in Cyprus and the one in Greece, which unfortunately I lived through twice, and the one in Ireland, has been so cathartic in how things turned out for all these jurisdictions. And then finally, we need to recognize that there is a gap between where we are in terms of tech and aspiration and where the people are in the use cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavlos. Thank you. So, if bridging the gap between the EU directives and the local realities and clarifying the purpose of the data is the first step, the next is how do we make the data truly useful for people and especially for cities? So, the second question for you is beyond compliance with EU strategies, how can open urban data become a living resource, empowering municipalities, researchers, and communities to achieve climate resilience, accessibility, and equity? In Cyprus's context of free worlds, where there are locals, foreign rich and foreign poor, who stands to gain, who might lose, and over what time horizon? And looking outward, what international lessons could Cyprus adapt, and how could Cyprus itself serve as a testbed for new models of data governance and use? Shall we start again from Marius?
Is it okay? Yeah. So I think one of the issues that is going on is the silos that exist between different components. So there's, it's this happens in all the countries. It's not just in Cyprus, and people traditionally don't talk to each other. They had no reason to talk to each other. Now with so much data, so many capabilities, the problems become more difficult, especially in emergency situations, like in fires, like in earthquakes and things like that. I think there is a need. This is where the demands are higher. This is where people need to exchange information, and this exchange of information is not only between government agencies; it's also between companies. It's not they don't want to share their data unless they have some benefit. So one of the key questions is how do these silos that exist are able to be bridged and be used to improve the quality of life, to improve the quality of the planet, and so on. So I think I think we need leaders. We need people to take, and I think universities can play a key role. I think just based on my experience, the different water utilities, they don't talk to each other, they don't talk, but they talk to us. I mean, all of them would want talk to us because they want to solve some of their problems. And I think to some extent, I think this is something that can be utilized to bring together the different components in order to be able to use new techniques. I agree with what has been said. I think AI has, to a large extent, has been overblown, and it will come back down. However, at the same time, I think there's a tremendous capabilities for being able to ask difficult questions and get some answers and get some solutions that you can use in practice, especially for this difficult type of situations. Let me stop here because we have a big panel and we allow time for questions from the audience. Yeah.
Okay. May I also confirm this experience that Marios described with on climate change data and different departments not talking to each other, and universities having this, let's say, central role, or how can I say, yes, a better stance, a better position to collect data, but nevertheless, this should be open to the society, to citizens. And now, exactly because of the different scales of problems and the extreme difficulty to collect this data from only one organization, citizens have also a role in even collecting and providing data. So for this, I believe data should be classified and be able to be shared on common platforms that should be shared across all different organizations, and at the same time understand the competitiveness and exclusivity that needs to be remain under certain circumstances and certain uses in order to acquire whatever extra benefit or generating added value for certain other purposes. But definitely there should be a classification of data that should be openly and commonly available for everybody, and that could be facilitated, I think, through the European legislation is already there, but we lack a lot in, like in many other things, in the implementation. So this should be common platforms, and implementation of EU laws and acts would help. This is my suggestion, and the classification of data. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm going to try to quickly cover two ideas that I think relate to what Marius and Marina have said. So first, I think it's important to understand that data is not enough, and to make data a living resource, we need to think about actionable insight. So nowadays we have the opportunity to create models that brings together hundreds of data sets, and we have that power now. The question is, what of these data sets we can actually change, or local authorities can actually modify to create changes? So we can create models that explains many things, but then so what? What we can do with this data to make a change? So which type of data local authorities, planners have actually control over and can change in a short term to really see impact? That's the first thing, I think. The second thing, it's about open data, but I think that's not enough. What we need apart from open data are open methods, open softwares, and open training. So we need, and this is something that we have learned with time, we have made our data sets open. We have an open mapping website where you can download our data. But then we understood that people also need to make use of this data. So we use open source softwares to analyze this. And then also we understood that with data available, with software available, then you need to make sense of this data. You need to understand and learn how to use it. So you need to create open trainings and skilling people. So, for example, we have platforms that where we train students, universities, companies, and we try to collaborate this. So basically, it's data, methods, and tools and trainings together, so we can move from information only to action.
Thank you. That's a great segue into what I would like to say, and that is, I think to start off with, we need to learn to make the most of what we've already got. And I'm thinking, for example, in the Twin to Expand, the soil model we're creating, we need to create the space and the room for researchers or institutions or interested private companies to innovate and show how to use this open data. Showing on, but okay. Closer like this? Okay, all right. So what we need to do is to show people, like Valentina was saying, how to use this open data with open methods, open training, skills, because there's a lot of insight we can gain from working with existing open sources of data, and but that does require an investment of time and effort. And somewhere we have to support or create the space for this kind of upskilling and for technical methodological development. I'm going to leave it there just to drop a hint. I'm not going to talk about this in detail, but again, coming back to the previous topic I mentioned about it's necessary as well to create pilot projects or demonstrator projects. So in the case of Cyprus, for example, pick a theme like heat stress or heat vulnerability, because that then frames a question, it then frames what data do we need, how do we analyze and pull these sources of data together to answer those kinds of questions. And working through these things in a structured way would help link these things up. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, 3 points. One, following on what you have mentioned about data, I think here it's important to note that the data that becomes available doesn't necessarily mean that it's for the right use case. For example, the fire brigade in Cyprus releases monthly data on the number of events it has responded to. So, and it actually breaks it down and says this fire station went to this, but of course it does not define for what reason it went, or which geography it covers, because of course the fire brigade divides the region of Cyprus in its own way, which it feels that it should not share with anybody else. In a similar manner, when we look at the Cyprus land registry, and we look at the same in Greece and in Romania, they report, for example, in Cyprus, how many properties have been transferred to another party within a given month. But of course, whether that transaction happened this month or 8 years ago and the title deed has now been issued, so the actual transfer took place today, is not clarified. And when we pose the question both to the head of the fire brigade and to the head of the land registry of why do you report the data this way, the answer was we collect and report the data for productivity reasons. So we measure how much work we do, which is how many call-outs did we do, and how many properties we have transferred. The fact that you want to track for our responsiveness for insurance purposes or the activity on the real estate market, we don't care. So we need to be cautious about wanting more data from the government unless we have defined the use case so that the government or anybody else indeed can provide us with the data. The second thing that we have found is that yes, there is more data around, but we have created gatekeepers. So, for example, when we asked for additional information for the Greek census data, we took 6 months, one of them bribing the security guard at the census office in Greece with a box of baklava, to find the lady who had to okay the release of the CIND of the Greek census data. So you have these people or these individuals around. Finally, because your question has not been addressed, because the question was who wins? Local foreigners, foreigners that are poor, foreigners that are rich. Rich people. Rich people will win. And the reason that they will win is that even when the data is not good enough, or the technology is not good enough, rich people have the capability to act on it. So rich people have the ability to access resources first and to take action. Now, over time, whether that spreads is a different story, but in the beginning, what you're going to see is rich people winning this and dominating segments of the economy, whether it's the real estate market, the food market, or anything else. And the fact that we all use two types of mobile operating system, one by Apple and the other one by Google, pretty much tells the whole story. Same with Internet Explorer, same with AI models, etc. So this is the world that we have, where a few companies dominate and where we will be feeding them with additional data for them to make decisions.
Thank you, Pavlos. That's kind of a sobering thought to finish with, which I hope we can discuss. We've heard about the obstacles, the opportunities, some inspiring practices, including from abroad. So if we have the time, we can open the floor to the audience for question and discussion.
We have around 5 minutes, and we need to wrap up. So please, if there are any questions, thoughts. Alessandro?
So first of all, thank you very much. I have a question about qualitative data, because all of you talk a lot about quantitative data, hard data, climate data, space syntax, I know quite well the method and so on, economic data and so on. But no one of you talk about qualitative data, like soft data in some way. There is the beautiful book by David Sim that talks about soft city, about people in some way in the end. I want to make an example. I arrived from Turin in Italy, and in the last 2 years the municipality of Turin started a collection of qualitative data through interview in the neighborhood, in also interview of the stakeholder, but also of normal citizen, through the design of the new regulation plan for all the city. The regulation plan, the master plan of the city is very old now. It's from 1995. So we need a new one because the cities change a lot. The economic situation, the cultural situation has changed a lot. And so they decide that they have all the quantitative data that they need, the transportation data, the climate data, the water system data, and so on. But they totally miss the qualitative data of the people, the experience of the people of the city. So what is working in this neighbor, what is not working, this neighbor is linked or not linked, on your feeling as a citizen to the rest of the cities and so on. And so they start to interview, like 15,000 people. I was part of this process. It was a very long process, a lot of reports and so on, to then deliver some report to the mayor, the municipality council and so on. So my question is, how collect this data, how link, and I refer to you in particular, link this qualitative data with the quantitative and hard data that we maybe have from other sources. Yeah, this is basically the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. Would anyone like to respond to this?
I can try. I think it's a very, very interesting question, and I will say I'm not an expert on this, but I will tell you about my experience working on qualitative data. And I think the key thing is collaboration between teams. No, so we need to link data that has completely different structures and structures basically. So something that you can see in quantitative data is that when we use qualitative data, we try in a way to transfer the qualitative structuredness of the data to a quantitative structure. So, for example, there are many now apps that allows communities to give opinions about, for example, their neighborhoods, their streets, and then that apps collect this qualitative data, the feelings, the impressions of people, and then you can transfer those into quantitative data, or in a way, in a structure that allows you to connect this to the quantitative structure of your data. So I think it's a very interesting question, and I think when we work with more kind of social or community or more like local level context, we try to think about how we create a data structure that is not closed, that it's open and allows for this other integration of data. But it requires a lot of collaboration between teams and knowledge on how to transfer this.
Very, very interesting question. In general, qualitative data is a lot more difficult to handle because people. Because people, when they say something, is not always. I mean, they try to justify why they are doing something, not necessarily what they really believe. So you have to. I mean, there's a whole field out there in cognitive systems trying to interpret what people think, what they say, and how they act. And in general, it's a very difficult thing. And so that data has to be analyzed, needs to be processed. And but it's a very good question. Thanks.
This is exactly the point that I was trying to raise with or to second, with a simple case study. If you walk down the street, you go to GASI B, the Regeneration Redevelopment Project, and actually it was very funny because 10 years ago the question was asked by the citizens of Nicosia, do you want us to make a park, or do you want us to develop this site commercially? And of course everybody voted, we want a park. Now that the municipality will be in significant deficit in the millions every year, because what they did is that they have 8 shops, 2 car parks, and a square that is of course all paved with nothing green. Nobody turned around and said, by the way, for the next 100 years we need to increase the taxes. So I agree with you that many times what we have seen is, and this has to do with how you structure, of course, the questionnaire and everything, is that especially when it comes to matter, people are in their majority, I'm trying to phrase it in the most, basically, if you think about IQ, by definition, half the people are below the average, right? The other half that are above, they don't necessarily understand what you are talking about. And the majority of people have no appreciation of anything that impacts them or their lives over the next 2 to 3 years, which is why people don't take care of their health, right? They don't exercise, they don't save for pension and everything else. So to ask people to have, or to, let's say, when we put a lot of weight on asking people, we run the risk of making long-term planning decisions on relying on data that, however well structured they are, have the problems that the professor has outlined, which is people think one thing, they say something else, and then they act on a third.
I think this opens a huge discussion that could be part of another panel. I'm just thinking here in this discussion that it's actually people who live in the cities. So, I mean, my first reaction would be that their feelings and their opinions do matter. The question is, how do we understand, or how do we get that information in a way that is representative, let's say, of the local context or the local culture, which again is a huge thing, but there's a big field on that and studies done. So I think it opens up a very interesting discussion on what kind of data and how do we link this kind of data, but also it raises the question of the validity of data and the way that we interpret it. And I think we didn't really go in depth in this panel, but a really I think, important question, at least from our experience, and I think most of us, the experience that we have, is how this data is made available, but also how it's interpreted by the people who are going to use it. And the institutional capacity becomes equally important. So people who are in the institutions and are trained to understand or use and interpret data, and that's where the collaboration becomes really important. Yeah, sorry. Okay, we are wrapping up. Last question, and we can wrap up. Yeah.
Hi, I was very happy and relieved to hear mention of not only open data, but also open tools and open training, and also to hear mention of extractivist models and the fact that most people are now using these two operating systems, and the dangers, right, of all these data being extracted and used by the few. So my question is, how can we bring this awareness that is actually growing more and more in tech policy discourse, how can we bring this awareness to smart city discourse and to Cyprus smart city implementation?
It's two sides. It's education, and education comes from, you know, and when we talk about education, I start from elementary school, if not beyond. So, you know, if we expect adults to, adults, you know, over 60, not over 20, over 60, over 70, to engage with technology and to engage with the technology in a meaningful manner, we need to go back and start with our children and start them as young as possible to get them involved in this. I hate to say it because I hate tech. I love money. That's why I'm in tech. So it's to be clear. So I think the first thing is we need to start the education, and it's at that point where everything breaks down. We were talking earlier about teaching in Greek or in English at the University of Cyprus. You know, the lack of air conditioning that works in our elementary schools, the fact that I need to register my dog, I need to physically take him at 8 o'clock in the morning in Athalassa because somebody needs to see that I have a dog. So so education needs to start from young going up and different levels of society. I think this is the first. The second is, like you have, that Gareth has said, is the use cases. Few use cases, that actually work. So if I make a complaint through the app of the University of Nicosia that there are 3 abandoned cars behind my building and for 6 months nobody comes, and I have to call the mayor's wife to sort it out, that is not a good idea of how tech should be used. Right? So I think these two, we need to sort of start younger and lower the bar as to the impact of technology in order to get more people to embrace it, and then we can start making more complicated use cases and absorbing more. I think this would be my sort of 2 cents.
Thank you, Pavlos. Anybody else would like to address this? No? Okay, so we have to wrap this up. Thank you very much for the insightful discussion. Thank you for being here. We'll continue the discussion in the next panel. Thank you.